Just as hope seemed to fade, a nurse rushed into the room, her voice urgent. "We found the match," she said. David looked up, his heart pounding. "Who? Where?" The nurse didn't answer as she rushed to prepare the donor. David clasped Linda's hand, whispering, "Hold on, love. Please, hold on." Just when it seemed like hope had completely slipped away, a miracle walked into the hospital. A man named Mr. Tonin, well known in the community for his kindness and generosity, had arrived to donate blood. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, and a presence that exuded quiet confidence. Known for his charitable deeds, Mr. Tony had a soft spot for helping others and was a regular blood donor at the hospital. The nurses quickly informed him of the emergency, and without hesitation, Mr. Tony offered to donate his blood. As the transfusion began, Linda's condition stabilized. Relief washed over everyone in the room. David's heart was bursting with gratitude. He rushed to Mr. Tony, shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you, sir. You've saved my wife's life. I don't know how to repay you." Mr. Tony smiled warmly. "No need to repay me, young man. I'm just glad I could help." As Mr. Tony was about to leave, Linda, now conscious but still weak, whispered, "I want to meet him." David leaned closer. "Are you sure? You need to rest." "Yes," Linda said softly. "I need to thank him." When Mr. Tony entered the room, Linda managed a faint smile. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice low but sincere. "You saved my life. I don't even know how to thank you." "It's nothing," Mr. Tony replied gently. But as he looked at Linda, something about her struck him. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a step closer. She had a resemblance, uncanny, almost unsettling, to his late mother. The shape of her face, the tilt of her eyes, even the way she spoke. It was as though he was looking at a piece of his past brought back to life. "Forgive me," Mr. Tony said hesitantly, "but you remind me of someone very dear to me." Linda frowned slightly. "I do?" "Yes," he said, his voice soft. "My mother. She passed away many years ago, but you look just like her." Linda gave him a polite smile, unsure of what to say. David noticed Mr. Tony's lingering gaze and cleared his throat. "Sir, we are truly grateful for what you've done. Linda needs to rest now." Mr. Tony nodded, but left the hospital feeling restless. Something about Linda tugged at him in a way he couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, Mr. Tony began visiting the hospital regularly. He brought flowers and gifts, ostensibly to check on Linda's recovery. But in truth, he wanted answers. The feeling of familiarity he had with her refused to fade. On the third day, when Linda was stronger, Mr. Tony sat by her bedside and began to ask questions. "Linda," he said gently, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but where are you from?" Linda's smile faltered. I'm just from a small town, nothing special." "And your parents? Your father? Your mother?" Linda hesitated, looking away. "I'm an orphan," she said quickly. Mr. Tony's brow furrowed. "I see, but do you know anything about them, even a little?" "No," Linda replied firmly, "I don't." It was a lie, but Linda had spent years guarding her past. Her mother's final words about her father were a painful memory she preferred to keep buried. Linda's mind drifted to her childhood. She had grown up believing her father was dead. Her mother, a hard-working but quiet woman, had always avoided the topic, dismissing Linda's question with a simple, "Your father is gone, and that's all you need to know." Her mother had worked tirelessly, taking odd jobs as a cook and cleaner to provide for Linda. But when Linda was in her teens, her mother fell gravely ill. On her deathbed, racked with guilt, her mother finally told her the truth. "I lied to you, Linda," she had said, her voice weak and trembling. "Your father? He's not dead. He's alive. I wanted to forget him, to move on." Linda, stunned, asked why her mother had lied all those years. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Because I couldn't bear the shame. Your father? He wasn't supposed to be part of my life. Years ago, Linda's mother had been a chef in a wealthy household. The family she worked for had everything except a child. The couple's inability to conceive had strained their marriage and filled their home with tension. One night, after drinking heavily out of frustration, the man of the house forced himself on Linda's mother. She had tried to resist, but his drunken state made him unpredictable and dangerous. Afraid of harming him and being accused of theft, or worse, she let the moment pass. The incident left her pregnant. When the man learned of the pregnancy, he was thrilled, seeing it as a second chance to have the child he had longed for. But his wife was furious. She saw the pregnancy as a betrayal and demanded Linda's mother leave immediately. Never come back, the wife had hissed. If you step foot near this house again, I will have you arrested or worse. Linda's mother left quietly, her heart heavy with fear and shame. She raised Linda on her own, hiding the truth to protect herself from the trauma. In the hospital, Mr. Tony couldn't shake the feeling that Linda was connected to him somehow. Her resemblance to his mother was too strong to be a coincidence. He decided to push further. Linda, he said, his tone firm but kind. I need you to be honest with me. Something about you feels familiar. Please. Tell me about your mother. What was her name? What did she do? Linda hesitated, her heart pounding. She wanted to brush him off, but his sincerity made it difficult. I told you, I don't know much about her, she said finally. She walked a lot. She said my father was dead. And do you believe that? Mr. Tony asked, his eyes searching hers. Linda looked away. I don't know. Mr. Tony leaned forward. Please, Linda. I can't explain it, but I feel a connection to you. Let me help you find answers. As the days passed, Linda found it harder to avoid Mr. Tony's question. Something about his presence felt safe, almost comforting. She didn't fully understand why, but she began to open up little by little. David, noticing the bond forming between Linda and Mr. Tony, grew curious but stayed supportive. Maybe he really can help, David said one evening. Linda sighed. Maybe, but what if the truth is worse than the lies I have lived with? David held her hand. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. And so, the journey to uncover Linda's past began. A journey that would change everything they thought they knew about love, family, and forgiveness. As Linda hesitantly recounted her mother's story, Mr. Tony sat in stunned silence. Her words echoed through his mind, pulling him into memories he had tried to bury. The details, the timeline, the circumstances, the tragedy matched too perfectly. His heart pounded as realization dawned. Could she really be my child? He cleared his throat, his voice trembling. Linda, the man your mother spoke of, that man was me. Linda's eyes widened in shock. What? I was that man, Tony said, his voice heavy with guilt. There is no excuse for what happened. I was in a dark place, filled with frustration over my childless marriage. I drank too much and lost control. I never knew your mother was sent away. I came back to look for her, but she was gone. Linda felt a rush of emotions, anger, confusion, disbelief, but she kept quiet, letting him continue. I have lived with regret for years, Tony admitted, his hands trembling. I've never had a child since then, and I think you might be my daughter. Linda stared at him, unable to speak. Could it be true? The man who saved her life, who had been visiting her daily, was her father? Tony suggested they confirm the truth with a DNA test. Though nervous, Linda agreed. Days later, the result came back. As the doctor handed the envelope to Tony, he hesitated, his hands shaking. Do you want me to read it? David asked, standing beside him. Tony nodded. unable to open it himself. David unfolded the paper and scanned the result. His eyes widened as he looked at Tony, then at Linda. "It's a match," he said softly. "You are her father." Tears filled Tony's eyes. He turned to Linda, overwhelmed. "You're my daughter," he whispered, his voice breaking. Linda felt a mix of emotions: shock, joy, anger. But as she looked at Tony's tear-filled eyes, she saw only sincerity. She knew he hadn't meant to abandon her or her mother. Tony fell to his knees. "Linda, I'm so sorry. I can never undo the pain you and your mother went through because of me. But if you will let me, I want to make things right." Linda's voice wavered. You really didn't know about me? I swear to you, I didn't," Tony said, his voice thick with emotion. Linda hesitated for a moment, then reached out and hugged him tightly. "I forgive you," she whispered. Tony wasted no time in trying to make up for lost years. He showered Linda and her family with love and care, determined to fill the void he had left behind. The first thing he did was buy them a stunning mansion in an upscale neighborhood. "This is for you and your family," he told Linda. "You deserve the best." Linda was overwhelmed. "Dad, this is too much," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It's not enough," Tony replied firmly. "I've missed so many years of your life. Let me give you everything I can now." He also set up a trust fund for her and her baby, ensuring their financial security for generations to come. David watched all of this unfold with mixed emotions. On one hand, he was thrilled for Linda, who finally had a family and the life she had always deserved. On the other, he was still grappling with his own estrangement from his parents. "You've been through so much, Linda," David said one evening as they stood on the balcony of their new home. "I'm so happy you found your father." Linda smiled, resting her hand on his. "I wouldn't have made it without you, David. No matter how much luxury I have now, you're the one who taught me what love really means." For Linda, the transition to this new life was overwhelming but heartwarming. She often found herself marveling at the kindness and love Tony showered on her, a stark contrast to the struggles she had faced in her early years. Tony, now a grandfather, was an active part of their lives, helping them care for their baby and supporting them in every way. 3 months later, Tony decided it was time to formally introduce Linda to his world. He planned a grand reunion party at his luxurious estate. Invitations were sent to the who is who of society: billionaire business partners, influential politicians, and old friends. Among them were Mr. and Mrs. Williams, David's estranged parents. The estate was dazzling on the evening of the reunion. Guests arrived in luxury cars. The guest list included some of the most influential figures in the country, including billionaires, politicians, and industry moguls. The atmosphere was lively, with soft music playing, laughter echoing, and glasses of champagne clinking. David and Linda arrived hand in hand with their baby, their faces glowing with happiness. She wore a simple but elegant gown that accentuated her natural beauty. She still felt a twinge of nervousness about attending such a high-profile event, but David's reassuring grip and Tony's warm smile put her at ease. Among the many guests were Mr. and Mrs. William. They had reluctantly accepted the invitation, not knowing the full extent of the party's significance. "This must be another of Tony's extravagant events," Mr. Williams remarked as they stepped out of their car. "I wonder what he's celebrating this time." Mrs. Williams adjusted her diamond necklace. Her curiosity piqued. "Well, it's Tony. Whatever it is, it's bound to be something big." As they mingled with other guests, exchanging polite greetings and business updates, the atmosphere began to buzz with excitement. Whispers about Tony's long-lost daughter filled the air. "Did you hear? Tony found his daughter after all these years," someone said. "She's here tonight with her husband," another added. The Williams exchanged a glance, puzzled. As the night unfolded, Tony took the stage to make an announcement. The guests fell silent, their attention focused on him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you for joining me tonight. This party is not just a reunion but a celebration of family, something I've learned to value more deeply than ever before." He gestured to the side of the stage, where David and Linda were standing. "I would like to introduce to you my daughter, Linda, and her husband, David." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Linda and David stepped forward. The Williams froze, their expression shifting from shock to disbelief. "That Linda," Mrs. Williams whispered, clutching her husband's arm. "And David." Their son and the young woman they had dismissed as unworthy stood together on stage, beaming with pride and joy. Tony continued, oblivious to their reaction. "Linda is the greatest gift life has given me. She and David have brought me more happiness than I ever thought possible. Tonight, I celebrate them and the future of our family." Applause erupted, but the Williams stood rooted in place, their faces a mixture of shock, guilt, and awe. As the party continued, the Williams hesitated, unsure of how to approach their son and his wife. Mrs. Williams finally spoke. "I can't believe it. All this time, we judged her, called her unworthy, and she's Tony's daughter. Our son's wife is the child of one of our closest business partner." Mr. Williams nodded, his face grim. "We were wrong. We misjudged everything. We have to fix this." They made their way through the crowd, their hearts heavy but determined. When they reached David and Linda, the young couple was engaged in conversation with Tony and few other guests. The Williams cleared their throats, and the small group turned to face them. David's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mom? Dad?" "David," Mrs. Williams began hesitantly, her voice softer than usual. She turned to Linda, her expression filled with regret. "Linda, we owe you an apology, a big one." Linda looked at them, her face unreadable. "An apology?" "Yes," Mr. Williams said, stepping forward. "We were wrong about you. We misjudged you, treated you unfairly, and for that we are deeply sorry. We were blinded by our pride and expectations, and we didn't see the incredible person you are." Mrs. Williams' eye glistened with tears. "We let our assumptions cloud our judgment. We didn't realize what a treasure David had found in you. And now, knowing you are Tony's daughter, we are ashamed of how we treated you. Can you forgive us, please?" Linda looked at David, who gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath and smiled gently. "I forgive you," she said softly, "but not because I am Tony's daughter. I forgive you because family matters, and holding on to resentment won't help any of us move forward." Mrs. Williams let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she whispered. Tony stepped in, his voice warm but firm. "It's good to see this family coming together. David and Linda deserve your full support and love, not because of our lineage, but because they've built something beautiful together." Mr. Williams extended a hand to his son. "David, I know we've been difficult, but I'm proud of the man you've become. We'd like to be a part of your life again if you will have us." David hesitated for a moment, then shook his father's hand. "I would like that," he said, his voice soft. Mrs. Williams hugged him tightly, then turned to Linda. "Welcome to the family, Linda. Truly." Linda smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and hope. The reunion party ended on a high note, with laughter, toast, and the warmth of reconciliation. As the Williams left the party that night, they felt lighter, their hearts filled with gratitude for the second chance they had been given. David and Linda, now fully embraced by both families, looked forward to their future with renewed confidence and joy. They had overcome trials, defied expectations, and proved that love, in all its forms, could bridge even the widest divides. If you enjoyed this video, you will surely love the next one. Click to watch now. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.